My name is Jensen. Let's learn some UiPath. This is the UiPath Beginners Course. I'm an RPA lead in my daily job, and that means I can teach you these things with knowing what you need and what you don't need. So there will be no nonsense here. You will learn all the most relevant techniques. Go to andersjensen.org/UiPath Beginners to find your course materials. There'll be a zip file with the course materials in. I'll have a site for each lesson. There'll be the description of the case and some relevant files to download. When you are done with the course, you can click the next steps. I'll try to keep this section dynamic. That means that I will update constantly with all the new relevant videos and info here. And remember, there's no magic in UiPath. It's very easy. Just get started. You will figure it out. By the end of this course, you will be an RPA developer. Let's get started. Let's install and set up UiPath. If at any point in this guide, your installation process doesn't look like the one I make, chances are that UiPath themselves has updated their installment procedure. Simply just click the video up here in the right corner or in the description where I will have updated the installation procedure. But go to uipath.com and click Try UiPath Free. Choose either to auth it or sign up with email. Put in your details. I will put in mine. Confirm the license terms here. And if you would like to receive some information, well, they sent out a lot of good information, but I'll warn you, they send you an email like 5 times a week. So I'll just click sign up here. I already got that. This is my password manager. I close it down. Now go to your mailbox and confirm your email. I'll click here. It will take you to the automation cloud where you can download UiPath Studio. Click that. And in the left corner, you'll see that we are downloading it, UiPath. Having downloaded the file, simply just click it. And the installation will start. That's it. Click the Don't Show Again and then click Close. Now we just need to connect to Orchestrator. So in the right corner of your screen, that's a little bit outside of mine, but there is an icon called UiPath Assistant. I'll drag it in here, but simply just open it. It's down where the clock is and we can sign in. So click that Sign In. Choose Yes to open UiPath. And we are signed in and connect to Orchestrator. Let's go back to the lessons. Now we simply just need to start up UiPath and we are ready for our first robot. So go to Start, search for UiPath Studio and open it. It will look like this and we are ready to build our first robot. We have installed UiPath and now we are ready to create our first robot. So click Lesson 2, your first robot. Scroll down to the description. Here we need to open a new project and then we'll create a robot that opens Notepad, type something in and click Enter, type another thing in, then have a delay of 5 seconds, click File, click New Window and then display a message box. Don't worry if you don't understand all this, I'll show it all to you so you can create it. So let's go to UiPath. To open up a brand new project and create automations in there, under New Project, click Process. Here we can give it a name. And since this is for our entire course, we can just say our UiPath Beginners Course. But feel free to give it the name you want. Under description, it says blank process. Here it can say our course workflows and choose a location. I just choose the default location, but you can definitely change that. Then click Create. This is UiPath as it looks when we open up. We can first go to Project down here. So we click Project. Here we can see our project. The first one, that is dependencies, that is packages, that is installed. We can see Excel, Mail, System, and UI automation. This is default packages. If we want to install more packages, that could be if we want some PDF automation, Outlook automation, or anything. We go up here to Manage Packages. Then we click All Packages and we can search for just as we want, but we won't. So we click Cancel. Our project here, the main workflow file, is called main.xaml, and that's the only file with an automation in. Right now it's blank. We can see it here. If we open up main workflow, we can see that we have a blank canvas, and this is where we will create our automations. Let's try to go to Activities and then just drag in a sequence. A sequence is simply just a container for our automation. As best practice, we always want to give these activities that we drag in a proper name. So here we could just call it our first robot. Simply just double click or right click and then click rename. So now we have a container. We have nothing in it. We can't do anything. Let's look at the process description. So we have this nice project, and let's start at the end. So we want to display a message box with a message in. Let's just copy this message over. So mark it and copy. Then go back to UiPath. Now we want to have a message box. So search for a message box up here in Activities. Make sure you are on the Activities tab. Don't worry, you will learn these things as we almost always are in the Activities tab. Scroll a little bit down and find message box. Then you can click it, you can drag it in, and now we dragged it into our sequence. So our sequence was our container, and this is our message box. One thing to remember is that whenever you see these warnings, something is wrong, something is missing in here. And when there's an inner warning that is in our inside activity here, then this sequence also display a warning because it says that there's something wrong in this sequence. What's wrong here is that we'll need to specify a text for our message box. And remember, we copied that. So simply just here in text must be quoted. Click here, and then to place in a text, put a quotation mark. You'll see that it automatically put 2 quotation marks, and then we can paste in the string. So this one here. Now you actually created your first robot, believe it or not. We can run. To run it, go up here to Debug File and click Run File. Again, click the drop down, click Run File. This is just a robot with a message box that says our first robot is completed. Nothing special, but you build your first automation. Congratulations with that. Is this video helping you? Then please give it a thumbs up. That will really make me happy and improve my reach. Thank you, and back to the course. Now let's build the workflow. So we go back to our process description. Here we need to open up a notepad, and then we need to type something in. Let's first open up a notepad. To open up a notepad, we go to Activities up here and find an Open Application. Don't worry, you will easily get all these activities within the next 2 hours. So we drag in an Open Application. And because we want the Open Application to run first, we drag it in the start of our sequence. So the order is that we open up an application now, and then we display a message box. You can see the arrow here again. That's fine. We will fill something in. To open up an application, we could either just click here to indicate window on screen. That is, we can tell UiPath that this is the application we want to open. But then we need to have that application open. So go down to your Start menu. Then find a notepad. Simply just search for it. Then click it. And here we have a blank notepad. So what you do is that you click this blue here, indicate window on screen. And now you can see that the elements here, they turn yellow, and we want to not open this browser, but we want to open up this notepad. So whenever this yellow border is around your notepad, simply just left click with your mouse like this, and here we open up the application. That's fine. We could also, if you go over here to properties, and if this properties is not shown, it look like this, you simply just click the properties here. So we click it and make sure that we pin it because we will use it a lot. So we could also have specified in the file name, but it's usually more easy just to open the application and have UiPath recognize it, like this. The selector, that is the .NET Windows Framework address. You don't have to worry a lot about this. Just notice that we have a selector here. That's it. So now we can try to run it. Usually, when we are RPA developers, we run these workflows a lot. We see if it works. And now it's not the most complicated solution, I'll give you that, but let's try it. So click the drop down up here and then click Run File. That's it. You see that we have opened up another instance of Notepad. That's because we haven't closed the first one, and then the message box came up. So click OK in the message box, the robot will finish. A message box will always pause the workflow, so sometimes it's good when we want to pause the workflow to have a message box in it. Let me close down one of the notepads. So when we want to automate in Notepad, we can see here that we have this open application, and then we have something in it called a do. That is simply just that whatever activities we drag in here, it will perform in the open application. And let's see what we need to do. So we go back to the process description. So we need to type in, this is our very first robot, and then click enter. And because now we know that we need the quotation marks, so let's copy them. So copy everything here, and then go back to UiPath. To type something in, we simply just search for a type into, like this. Then we drag it in. We need to indicate where we want to type in because we just opened the applications. Now, I know that we can only type something in here, but imagine that you have an application where there will be several places to type something in, a system like SAP or Navision. Then we need to specify it. So we click here again, indicate, and here we can see that we can type in here. We could also type in here. That wouldn't make a lot of sense here. We could type in here, here. We could choose all the elements. But choose the blank canvas here in the notepad, click here. That's it. So now we need to type something in. And remember, we just copy that one, so paste it in with a Control V, like this. So here we have, this is our very first robot, and then let's just fix some things. So here we open up the application, and remember I told you to always rename your activities. Right now it doesn't matter a whole lot, but it will be best practice when we develop complicated workflows. So simply just right click or double click, then we can say open application, delete this and maybe just say notepad, like this. Here we will have it type into, and then this editable text doesn't say a whole lot. So we could try to delete it and then say something meaningful. Then we can say type into our first line maybe. Just make a description that you can easily interpret when you open up your robot later. We can also right click here and then we can choose annotations, add annotation. So here we make a description to make it easier for ourselves or our fellow developers. So we could say something like, this is an annotation. Usually you didn't want to make an annotation to all your activities because this is pretty trivial. We can see that we type into our first line and we can see what's going on. But with some more complicated activities, we want to give it an annotation. Again, we can try to run the robot and let's see that it actually works. So we will delete this or close it down rather, and then run the robot. So again, click the drop down up here and then click run file. We open up a notepad and we see that we typed in, this is our very first robot. Then our message box came up. That's fine. We click the message box. Our robot is done. Let's go to the next step in the process description. Here we want to click enter after this one, and then we want to type in, this is still our first robot. So copy this one here. That's very simple. Go back to UiPath. And then to make the enter, I'll help you here. Because if we want to hit enter, we can do it in several ways. The easiest thing to send hotkeys is to just click this plus here. You can see that we can send all sorts of hotkeys here. But we want to find the enter that is here. This one. You could of course also have used this shortcut here, quotation marks, hard brackets, K enter, but it's more easy just to click the plus. So now we have our first line and then we click enter. Then we want to type something into the next line. So still have a type into and drag it in. Now we need to indicate it, and I'll tell you why in a few seconds. So click the indicate. And now you can see we can't really find it. Sometimes this happened. We could solve that in two ways. We could first make sure that we have the Notepad open, and then we could do the indicate again. To get away from here, you simply just type in escape on your keyboard. We get away. So we could make sure that this is open, and then we click indicate, and we can see that we have it now. Another cool way that I want to show you is that click escape again. Simply just minimize the Notepad. So whenever you're here, you might want to, we already have clicked the indicate. Then you can click F2 on your keyboard, and 3 seconds will go where you can do something, and then the indicator will come back. We'll use that a lot. So F2 to make a delay with 3 seconds, and then you can see this selection again with the yellow things here. So now we want to type something in here. That's fine. And what do we want to type in? We already copied that. So Control V, paste it in. That's it. So now we have 2 lines. Let's try to run it again. So close down the Notepad like this. We won't save it. We don't need it. Then we run the file. We open up a Notepad. This is our very first robot. This is still our first robot. So far, so good. Then we click OK. So now we have a robot that can type something in. It can send keystrokes. It can open applications actually as well. And we have a message box. But we still miss something. Let's create the last steps in one sequence. So we have a delay of 5 seconds. Then we click File, New Window, and we already have this message box. So go back to UiPath. The first thing that we need to do is that we need to have a delay, and then we click File, New Window. That's it. So right after this type into, we can rename that as well. So we can say type into our second line, like this. Then we'll search for delay, because now we want 5 seconds delay. A delay is something that we use a lot as well. Sometimes we wait for applications to load web pages or something, or simply just wait a few seconds to make sure that the system is stable. Here we simply just drag it in again, delay. You'll see that there's not something we can fill in like up here, but that's because it's up here in properties. That's the duration. The duration is filled in when we say hours. So we say 00, that's 0 hours. No quotation marks here because it's time. Then we say colon. We will then have to specify the minutes. It will still be 0 minutes. Then we'll have 5 seconds. That's 05. Let me repeat it. We don't need quotation marks because it's a time. We specify the hours, the minutes, and the seconds like this. So this is 5 seconds. So now we have our delay. Then we want to click somewhere. To do that, you find a click like this and drag in the click like here. Then we'll indicate what we want to click on. So again, click. Then we'll click File, right? And we can rename this. So here we click File. That's it. Now we just need to click when we have clicked File, we need to click the new window, right? So that is simply just another click. So drag it in. We need to indicate it. And now you can see we can't really do something because when we click here, it will just be recognized as another file We don't need to click the file twice. That was not our mission. It was not stated in the process description. To make sure that we fix this, we could of course also always delete this and drag in another click. But another cool way to do it is to click these 3 ribbons and then click indicate on screen. This will let you reselect it. And again, we won't repeat the mistake. And remember, we had one cool way to make sure that we could click this file without selecting it. That was the F2. So click F2, 3 seconds will go by, click the file, then wait. And when you see these yellow ones, we can now select the new window. Let me repeat that, because this is important. So we need to reselect this click item. So we click these 3 ribbons, we click indicate on screen. Then we'll click F2 like this. We'll click the file and then we'll wait 3 seconds. And now we can select it. That was the new window we want to select, like this. So now we are done with our robot. Let me close down the notepad like this. Here we will just fix the description. We will say new window. Again, these descriptions, they are not mandatory. I'll recommend you to do it to get in a good habit of doing so, because this is very important. So now we should be done. We can try to run it, but let's first inspect it. We open up a notepad. Then we type in a line of text. We type in a second line. We made a delay of 5 seconds. Then we click file. We click new window. And remember, we had this nice F2, so we could have a delay of 3 seconds. We use that here. And then we have our message box. Let's try to run the robot. So we click the drop down and then we click run file. We open up Notepad, we type it in. We have a delay of 5 seconds. We click the file, we click new window. We see that we open up a new Notepad. And then the message box with the finish message came up. Congratulations, you built your first robot. You could follow a process description and you could actually do some very complicated things. Wasn't that easy? Let's go back to the lessons. We'll go one back. Lesson 3 is about variables. So click that lesson here and then scroll down the description. Here we need to create some variables and do some operations within it. I won't read this, I'll just show you and you'll need to replicate me. So again, have your UiPath open. This was our previous project, and to create a new sequence, because this was our first automation, I'm not sure that it's very smart to have the second automation in the end. You could of course have it, but let's create a new one. To do so, we can click the new up here and then we can choose sequence. We could call it something like variables and then we'll click create. So this one will be created in our project. Here we can see it. We have our main, that was the first robot, and then we have the variables. So this was the next sequence. If you want an overview of what sequences that you have created, we can go to project down here. Here you can see that we have our main and then we have our variables. So it's as easy as that. But let's create the variables workflow. First, we will have a write line that says something. So simply just search for a write line like this and drag it in. We want to type something in. And what did we want to type in? Your name is, and then your name. So what we do here is that we'll type this one in here. We go back to UiPath, then we'll put it in. Because it's a string that is text, then we'll have the quotations marks around it like we did in our first robot. So we do this and then I'll say Anders, put in your name, like this. Now we click away and we can run it. We run the file and you'll notice that nothing really happened, or you'll think that nothing happened. But this write line, we can go down to output and observe. Here it is, your name is Anders. A write line, we use that a lot when we develop these robots because it can type out their variables and it can type out their values. And it's an easy way to see what's in it. Right now it's pretty easy to see it, but now you know. So we will, to minimize this output again, we can just click it again. So click it, open it, click it again to hide it. That's it. But now let me introduce variables, because if we easily want to have this name changed, that could be to any other name, we could create a variable for that. The easiest thing to do is to go down to variables here. We can see that we have a variable manager. It's empty now, but we can create it. So we will call it str. This is just a prefix that will describe the variable type as you see here. Because we are creating a string, we will say str, always with small letters. And then we can give it a meaningful name. I'll say name. So the prefix, that says something about the type. And then the name is, that says something meaningful about the content. And here, since it's a name that we want to create, we call it str name. The variable type, we want to create a string, but we could choose plenty of other variable types. A string is simply just, in quotation marks, any kind of text. It could be numbers as well. The smart thing here is that we can use it for everything. We cannot do calculations with it unless we do some operations. So simply just store your text here. Always go with a string variable if you don't have a reason to it. And that is usually when you want to make calculations, then you won't do it with a string. The scope, that is variables, say that we have a sequence inside. Let me show you here, like this. And then we can choose that the variable was only defined inside the inner sequence. So if we click the sequence scope here, we can choose the sequence. And that is that we can only use it in here. It will get reset whenever we go past that sequence. It's useful when we want to have a clean and nice workflow. It's best practice, but don't worry, it will be on your advanced course. So let's change the scope back to variables and move the right line out. This was an advanced concept that I just want to show you. So now, because we want to use this variable up here, so we will, instead of this Anders, we will delete it. Make sure you still have the space like this. That's it. Then we will, to get a variable, go outside the quotation marks and then have a plus and then this variable's name. You can see that in this IntelliSense, we can see it here, str name, that's this one. You can choose it by double clicking. But say that you don't have this drop down, it could be really nice to have, couldn't it? You can just press Control space, that is Control space, you will have it. Choose the str name, you can double click or tap it, and now we can run it. Do remember that the default is empty, so there will not be saying something. Let's try to run it. Here, we can go to output and we can see that it's blank. But let's fill something in. Say that I want to have Anders, like before. I just, in quotation marks, type in Anders down here in the variables manager. I run the robot again. Like this, we can go to output and we can see that our name is Anders. Isn't that clever? So we use the variable. And now the smart thing come up. Because if I want to change this one here and have Jenny, for example, I can run the robot again. That's it. We go to output and we can see that this has now changed to Jenny. So a variable is simply just a container. We use it a lot. Always use variables if you have things that could change, because then it's easy to update. Another cool thing around it is that, say that we want to use this name a lot in our workflow, then we can just have this variable, and if this one change value, we only have to change it down here in this variable manager. So far so good. So now you learned about string variables. Another type, that is integer. So let's create an integer. Create variable. An integer, that is just a whole number, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll call this int, and then we can say our number like this. In the variable type, choose an integer like this, and we can give it a default name. We could, for example, say 912. And it was only the strings that need to be in quotation marks. Every other variables will simply just be typed out like this. We can't really type this variable out because we are only allowed to type out strings. So we will need to convert it to a string. So if we go up here, let me delete what we have already wrote like this. Then we'll say int our number, press the tab to have it automatically filled in. Then we can say dot to string. This dot to string is something that you'll use a lot, because when we want to print things out, we always go with the toString. Now we can see it here. We can run the file. It will print out our 912. We can see it in here like that. But say that we want to do a calculation with this integer. That's something we usually do. Say we want to add something to it. It's very easy to do. What we'll do here is that we'll click the 3 dots up here. Like this. Let me maximize it. You could, of course, edit it in here. But to have a more larger view and a cleaner view, click the 3 dots up here in the properties, text. Because now, before we convert it to a string, we will do an operations with it. So first, have parentheses around your integer. Say that we want to add 5 to it, we simply just say +5, like this. We could also multiply it, so multiply it with 5. Let's do so. Then we'll click OK. Now let's run our robot. And if we go down to output again, you'll see that we have now multiplied with 5. Isn't that clever? But you might say, Anders, I need some decimal numbers because all my database or Excel sheets, that's always in decimals. Sure, no worries. We can make a double. And a double is simply just a decimal number. We can say DBL double. We can say our decimal number, like this. And then in the variable type, we'll choose a double. Oh wait, we can't find it. Well, there's a good reason for it. We just click Browse for Types. Here you will see a lot of variables. Well, don't worry, I'm not using all these. I think I use like 10 variables in my daily job as an RPA developer. So don't worry. So simply just search for a double. Like this. Go down to the system that is MS Corlib here 4.000 and choose this one. Then click OK, like this. So now we have a double. And then we can simply just type in a variable. And the decimal, that is always a dot. So if you come from a culture, I live in Denmark, and here we use a comma for the decimal, but be sure to make a dot as that is the notation we use in UiPath. So here I'll say 912.45. And we do the same thing as we did up here. So in our right line, we could either go directly in here, or we can click the 3 dots here. What we'll do here is that we'll, inside the parentheses, we can say DBL, and now I don't want to write this out. Remember, I can click Control Space to have this one show up. And because I wrote out DBL, this variable is the only one that shows up. So I just double click it. And you could say that the parentheses, they are redundant, but I'll use it in a second, so I'll let it be. It never hurts. So then I click OK. Now I will write out our double here. So I click Run File. Like this. I go to Output. And here I can see my double. That is a decimal. But again, we could choose to make all sorts of additions, multiplications, all that stuff to it. But I think you get it. It's the same way as with integers. So now we covered strings, integers, and doubles. Another variable type, that is booleans. So if I create a boolean called BUL condition, like this, and then on the variable type, I'll choose boolean. Again, you will see that you find it up here, boolean. A boolean, that is a variable type that can hold 2 variables. It can either be true or false. It's that easy. If we are not specifying anything here in default, it will be false. So we can write that out exactly like we write out the numbers. So if I go up here, I can delete this. Then I can say bool condition like this, then dot to string. Again, we need the dot to string because it's not a string. We can write it out here. You will see that the value will be false. Like this, we go to output and it's false. We could easily change it either here in defaults by simply just writing out true, then the value will now be true, or we can do something else because it will be false as default, but we can actually change that value here in the workflow. We can do that with an assign. So we drag in an assign. And here we'll first have on the left side, we need to specify what value do we want to change. And that was the bool condition. So press Control space, then find the bool condition that is here, like this. What value do we want to change it to? Well, it's false down here, but now we want to have it as true, like this. We can run the file again. And now you'll see that we have a true here. That's it. It's that easy. We could change all variables. It's not conditioned to booleans. It will also be possible to change strings, integers, doubles, whatever. That's it. The boolean, true, false. Now our last variable type, that is data tables. That is a very exciting part, and I need you to pay close attention. Because a data table, it looks very boring, but we will use it all the time when we do Excel automations, everything. So learn this. I'll delete this sign here, like this. And now we'll create a data table. But we won't create it down here. We could, of course, also create a new variable and then choose the type to be a data table. But let's just not do it. You'll see that we have a variable 1 here. We could easily delete that by simply just right-click and delete, like that. Always delete variables you have no use for. But over here in Activities, find a build data table, like this. Drag it in. You'll see that this is empty too. In our data table wizard, click that. Here you will see a data table. A data table is simply nothing else than an Excel sheet. An Excel sheet that exists only in the memory of our robot. So what we do usually with a data table is that we convert our Excel sheet into a data table to be able to do all sorts of advanced operations on it. Like this here. There's a default value here. I always delete it. I'm not sure why they will have these defaults. So delete everything so you only have the plus and this cross. We'll need to have 2 columns and then 2 rows of data. So click the plus here. I'll just say the first column will be named ID, like this. Then I click the plus. And the second one could be name. Then I click OK. It will be strings. Remember, we use strings a lot unless we don't have a reason to, even though that we work with numbers, because that's the most easy thing to store. That's the most easy thing to store variables. Then we need some data to fill in. This could just be 1. Go over to the name, type in alpha. Now click enter and a new row comes up. We'll say 2. You can say beta, like this. So a simple data table. It looks like your Excel sheet with columns and rows. Then we click OK. Because this data table needs to have a variable name attached to it, remember all these other variables had the values, they had a name attached to it. We also do it here. We could, of course, create it down here, or we can do something smarter. So in the output data table, click Control K, and then you can call it a name. I call it DT, my first data table, like this. Then I click enter. When we press Control K over here in a variable field, then it will automatically create our variable down here. So it's a lot easier than to first fill in the name and then have to specify the type. Then we'll make sure that we don't make any mistakes, because now we have chosen the data table. Say that I mistakenly created this one myself and choose an object. Now you'll see that we have an error. So let me go back to data table, and I created a new variable here in the very speed I clicked. So delete it, like this. So our data table is now here. We could do operations within it, but let's just print it out to our right line. To print out a data table, we need a output data table like this. Drag it in. 2 things we need to type in. We need to have an input. The input, that is just the data table that we want to print out, like this. That will be the DT, my first data table, right? And then we want to output it to a string. So if we go up here, we can press Control K and we can say str our DT, like this. You'll see that the variable will be created down here. And now you think that will be enough. But actually this output data table is only the conversion from data table to a string. So if we want to write it out, we'll still need to use a write line. So let me delete it here. But because it's now a string, we can simply just type in str our DT, like this. Let's try to run it. And let's just recap what actually happened here. We built a data table. We outputted it, that is, converted it from a data table to a string, and then we wrote out that string. So we run the robot again, like this. We go to output, and here we can see that we have our data table. It looks like an Excel sheet. That is the column headers, and then we'll have the rows. That's it. So that was lesson 2 about variables. Let's go back to the lessons. Is this video helping you? Then please give it a thumbs up. That will really make me happy and improve my reach. Thank you, and back to the course. Lesson 4 is about if and while. Let's click that. Here we need to create a guessing game where we will assign a secret variable between 1 and 100. Then we will ask the user to guess that number. We will evaluate and tell the user if he or she was correct. If not, we will ask the user again to guess the number, and we will give him a hint saying that if the number was too low or too high. And then the game will eventually end if our user is a little bit smart. Let's create that in UiPath. So let's create a new sequence. Click the drop down here and sequence. We can call this if while, then click create. First, let us talk a little bit about what we are going to learn here. So click the activities. First, we will have an if. So go up here and search for an if. An if is very easy. So we drag the if in. We already talked a little bit about it. We talked about conditions. And an if will evaluate a condition. So for example, here we can say 2 equals 2. I mean, is this true? Yes. So an if simply just evaluate a condition. If it's true, we go down here and do some activities, else we go here. We don't have to have activities in both. Say that we only want to do it when this condition is true, then we have the activities over here, nothing here, and the sequence will go on. So we will have activities down here as well. But let's say that we want to evaluate on something else. That could be user input. So we could take user input and then we can do something about it. To take user input, we will have an input dialog. So search for an input dialog and drag it in. It's simply just a pop-up box asking for the user for an input. We could call this guessing game because this is what we are going to create in quotation marks. Remember that. Then the input label. Here we could say something to the user so he or she will know what we're going to do. This one could be in quotation mark, input a number between 1 and 100. Because this input dialog, that will take some user input. We store that user input in a variable. So we could go over here to the output, the result, press Ctrl K, and it will always be a string variable that will be stored, even though that we ask for a number. So we need to convert that string to a number if we want to make calculations on it. We'll do that later, as we saw in the previous lesson. So Ctrl K over here and simply just say str user input, then click enter. We can go down to variables and we can see that we have created this string variable. That's fine. Now we can evaluate on this user input. So we can evaluate on the number that the user put in. Say that our number that the user have to guess is 65. Then we can ask, is the user input equals to, and then quotation marks, because it is a string up here. So we need to have the 65 as a string as well. So are these two numbers equal to each other? Then we can have a message box for the user. So we can say message box, find that over here and drag it in. What we can do here is that we can simply, in quotation marks, we can say you guessed right, like this. Now we can run the robot. So we run the robot. And first, let us try to make a wrong guess. Here we will have the 45 or 455. So 45, we click OK, nothing happened. And that is because we take the user input here. We say, is the user input equal 65? No, it's not. Then we end over here in the else and nothing really happens. But if we guess 65, we will have this message box come up Let's see that. So here we can say 65. We guessed right. That's right. Remember to always have a question that can be answered with true or false here in the if, otherwise it won't work. Now we will create the guessing game. Because we want to have our secret number. That one could be 65 or it could be anything, but let's create a variable for that. So we create an integer. So we'll say int our secret number, and we will have an integer for that. Here we will have a default value for it, but you could create a solution where you assign it randomly. I'll just say 89. Remember, it's not in quotation marks as it is an integer. We will also need to convert this str user input, that is a string, to an integer. So if we go in here, we'll say int, and then we'll say user input. Again, it's an integer, like this. And this one will not have a default value because we'll have the user to give it to us, like this. And now we can do some clever things. Because we'll convert this string up here to an integer. Remember, the user gave us a string and we want to have it in an integer so we can compare it with our secret number. It's not a problem if we just want to compare it like this, but say that we need to know whether the number is higher or lower than the secret number, then we'll need to convert it to an integer. So drag in an assign from over here, like this. What variable do we need to assign the value to? Well, that was just our int user input. We created that to collect the user input. So in here, we will say int user input, like this. And over here, we will convert this string to an integer. So we will simply just say convert dot to int 32, like this, parentheses, and then we'll have a value. Here we can type any string in, or we could use the variable, the string variable from up here. So that is str user input. So now we have converted this string to an integer. I know I repeat myself a lot, but that is just to make sure that we will learn it. So here we can now ask, is our user input lower than the correct guess? So here I'll simply just say int user input, that is the user guess, is that lower than our secret number, like this? Then we know that the user have guessed too low, otherwise he have guessed too high. So we can create two message boxes. You can also copy activities, so Control C, Control V, like this. So here you guessed too low, here you guessed too high, like this. So we can try to run it, and remember our secret number here was 89. So if we run it again, we could try to guess on 55. We'll click OK. You guessed too low. That's fine. And likewise, if we are higher, we'll have guessed too high. But actually, what we want here is that we want to, if this is the case, if these two guys are not equal to each other, then we know that the user haven't guessed the correct thing. So we'll ask the user again. So we'll ask the user over and over and over and over. Asking something over and over, that can be done in a while loop. It's named while here, but it is a loop. If we simply just drag it in here after the initial question, then we can ask, are these two guys not equal to each other? Then we will ask the user again, and we'll have this if here inside. Otherwise, we know that the user have guessed right, so we will not go in here. So a while loop again has this condition it will evaluate on. It will go on forever. Let me show you. So if the int user input is not equal to, and a not equal, that is just like this, int our secret number, like this. So this says, are these two guys not equal to each other? Go in here. And when this body in here is done, we can drag activities in. Then we will look at the condition again. Are these two guys still not equal to each other? We'll just perform it again. Beware that if this is never the case, you have created an infinite loop. This can run forever. So account for that in your robots. But now it's okay. What do we want to do in here? Well, we know that the user have guessed wrong because these two guys are not equal to each other. Then we'll have our if in. So simply just take this if and drag it in. It can be a little bit complicated, but let's try to have a look. We have this while loop here. This ask, has the user guessed wrong? Yes. We'll simply just ask, is the user input lower than the secret number? Yes, over here. No, over here. So what we will do is that we will delete these two message boxes, and then we will have another input dialog here in each of these things where we'll give the user some information. So over in activities, find two input dialogs and drag them in. Like this. We could have copied it from up here. So we'll simply just use the information that we have up here. Maybe not the input label, but as a whole. But let's copy it in here and here. And remember, if this was true, then we were over here. Then we'll note that the user input was too low. Then we can say, inside the quotation marks, we can say, your guess was too low. And likewise, we can say over here, your guess was too high, like this. Again, we will need to assign it to a variable. And remember, because we'll ask the user for this input again here, that will be stored in a string. So here, again, we will just not say Control K this time because we already have a variable for that input, and that is just the str user input, like this. Then we can go over here. And instead of doing it up here, we can simply just type it in here as well. It's just a matter of preferences, like this. So again, we will take this string and convert it to an integer so we can compare it up here. Otherwise, we will use the old value from the user input we got up here. So we need to convert this input. And as you see here, we will use it on both. Then we can just drag it outside the if, just outside here. So the if will go on, then these two things will happen, and just outside the if, we will convert the number. So we'll take this assigned, copy it, and then outside the if, we will put it in, like this. So now this one will run forever until the user have guessed right. That means that we will not pass this while loop until the user has guessed right. So if he's really bad at this guessing game, this robot will go on forever. But let's say that he's good. Then we'll just need a message box down here. So drag in a message box. Here we will say, congratulations, you won. Like this. So shouldn't we try it? And remember, we put it 89 here, but the user won't know. So let's try it. I'll just say 50, then I'll click OK. Your guess was too low. Then I'll say 75. My guess was still too low. 85. Well, 95. Now my guess was too high. I'll say 89. That's it. We won. So you have built a guessing game, and without knowing, we actually came a lot round. This is very advanced stuff, so make sure you got a good grip on this. I'm sure you have. The while and the if. That's it. Let's go back to the lessons. Lesson 5, Excel and Data Tables. This is probably the most important lesson as we use Excel and data tables a lot. First, let me briefly introduce it. Excel, we obviously have a lot of data in. When we want to work with that data in UiPath, we convert the Excel sheets to data tables, do all the operations with it, and then we write it back to Excel. Why do we do that? That's because we have the most options within the data table set. Let us look at our mission. So we click the Excel and data tables, and then we'll have the description. We need to read an Excel sheet. We will calculate the totals column, and then we will place a yes in the big order. But let's look at the files. It will be more easy to understand. So I'll close this one down. If you haven't downloaded the course files, make sure you do that. And then in the Excel and data tables folder, we choose the orders and open it. Here. And this is just a simple orders sheet. Do note that our sheet is named orders. We have 6 columns: order ID, name, quantity, price, total, and big order. That's the headers. Then we have 4 data rows with data in. What we want to accomplish here is that we want to fill in the total column for each one of these items. What we do here is simply just multiply the quantity with the price and then have the total. So we'll need to do a little calculation here. And then if this total is bigger than 10, then we will place in a yes here, and it will be a yes down here. But we want our robot to do it, as we could have like maybe 200,000 rows, and I'm not the one sitting here doing it manually. So that's it. So keep in mind that when we want to automate, we are looking at the sheet orders, and then in the total column and the big order column. And we have the quantity and price. That's how we calculate total. So let me close down the Excel sheet and go to UiPath. I won't save anything, that's fine. I go to UiPath. Then we will create a new sequence. So sequence, I'll just say Excel and DT. Then I'll click create. So as I told you, we want to read this Excel sheet into a data table. So over in activities, find an Excel application scope and drag it in. Here we need a workbook path. And the workbook path, that is just simply the Windows address of this sheet. So wherever you place the course files, say shift right click, copy as path, and go in here. We can of course always just paste it in here. Now you have the address. But the elegant solution is to create a variable for it. Because if we build workflows and these guys, they change, often we develop on one computer and then move to another computer or a server, then this one will not be correct. So let's make a variable. So we go down here, because then we can just change it here in the variable. So here I'll just call it str Excel path. It is a string, that's fine. Over here in the default value, I'll paste in the path like this. Because now instead of hard coding in the entire address, we just type in the variable like this. So here we read it. You can see that we have some settings over here. The one thing that I'll almost never use is the visible. We don't want visible calculation in the Excel sheet. That is, if the robot runs, we don't want to see all the calculations. That's just a waste of time. So now we have defined our Excel path, then it's time to do something. Because you might think that we already read it here into a data table, but that is not the case. We will need to find a read range to do so. Here we have 2. We have the one under Excel and the one under Workbook. The read range under Excel is the one that we will use, so drag it in. And let me briefly explain the Workbook. If you somehow don't have Excel installed on your computer, you can simply just delete this Excel application scope and just use the read range from down here without a scope around it, and then just choose the workbook activities. But we have an Excel installed, so we can use this one. Here we can set in the range. These 2 quotation marks, these 2 guys, that will indicate that we will take everything in our sheet. That's fine. But remember, our sheet was not named sheet 1. This is just a default value. That might be the case sometimes, but pay close attention to this. Our sheet was named orders, so change it like this. Then over here we can define if our table have headers. Our sheet indeed have headers. Remember the price, quantity, and total, and so on. Now we just need to convert it to a data table here. So Control K, or not convert, we need to read it into a data table. So here we can just say DT, let's call it DT fruit, like this. So we go down to variables and we can see that we have created a data table. So far so good. So now we can do operations within this data table. What we need to do here is that we'll need to iterate through each row one by one and then do the calculations. To do so, we will have a for each row, take this one here and drag it in. What this does, it takes for each row, that is the row here up in this data table. And remember, this data table looks exactly like the Excel sheet. It has rows and columns as well. So we read each row in DT fruit, that is this one. And now we can do something because we want to do a calculation. And remember, we worked with variables, so this will be very easy for you. Simply just drag in an assign like this. What we do here is that we'll want to, for the current row, remember we are iterating through row by row, we want to assign a value to the total column. What we do here is that we'll say row, that is the current row that we are referring to, dot. Then we will need to say what column do we need to target, that is item. Then parentheses, you'll see that it automatically makes a parentheses end whenever we type in the first one. Then in quotation marks, we'll just say total. This is the column that we want to target for all the rows, so we can write this. If you want, you can also use index number, but as they can change, it might be a little bit unstable. But say you just want to target the fourth column, then you'll say 3 because it's 0 indexed, or you'll say the first column, that is 0. But this is unstable, so try to use column names if you can. We can. That is total. Like this. What value do we need to type in? We need to multiply quantity with price. So instead of, we can do it here, but it's very small. So I'll open up the value up here. What I want to do here is that I want to make the multiplication. So, and that is, I want the current row, then item, parentheses, quotation marks. Then I want quantity. I always have a little bit of problem around doing so. But in order to calculate on it, we need to convert it to a double, because it might seem that we have numbers when we do this, but it's always objects, which we can't use. I know it sounds a little bit counterintuitive because you can see the numbers in an Excel sheet, but when we read it from there, they are objects, so we need to convert it. And we already did that, remember. So what we do here is that we'll say convert dot to double, like this. Then we'll have a parentheses around this, and now we convert it to a double. Do remember that in the Excel sheet we only have integers, so we could have just converted to an integer because that's whole number, but let's say that we got decimal numbers, we accounted for that here. So now we have the first one in double. We simply just need to do the same thing with the price, and because we are lazy, we don't like manual work, we copy this, then we'll have a multiplication sign, we'll paste it in again, and then we'll just need to fix the quantity. So this one here, that will work. But here we have it as doubles, but we want to write it in, so we will write it in as a string. So make a parentheses around it, like this. Now we are writing it in, but we are only writing it to the data table, because that is the DT fruit. We are not touching the Excel yet. And again, a data table only exists in the memory. That's why when our robot runs. So make sure we save it to the Excel sheet, otherwise nothing will happen. So what we want to do here is that we will make all these calculations, and then after this for each row, we can write the Excel sheet. We could of course also do it after each transaction here, the assign, but that's a little bit irrelevant. So just do it here, it will make your robot faster. What we want to do is find a right range, that's here. Choose the one from Excel and drag it in. Make sure you are outside the for each row, but still here in the Excel application scope. That's it. What sheet do we want to write to? I will just update my order sheet, but sometimes we want to read from one sheet and then paste the results to another sheet to make sure that we won't overwrite anything. But we will just do it here. Orders. And where we will start, that is A1. I usually just delete everything here in the range unless I need to use it. Right now it doesn't do anything different, but as always, just delete it unless you want to target a specific starting range. So if we, for example, put B1 here, it will start in B1. Then the data table, that is DT fruit. One last thing is to add headers. Now we can run it. So let us run. Like this. Let's inspect our Excel sheet. Here, and we can see that we have now calculated the total column. Then we just need to ask if this total column here, is this bigger than 10, then we will have a yes in big order. But let's delete this so we can see that everything works. So delete the total column, save and close. Let's do the last part of the robot because we can do it right here. So we already updated the total column. Now we just need to ask a question. Is the total column bigger than 10? What can we use here? I'll give you 2 seconds to think about it. Yeah, as some of you might have guessed, we can use an if. So drag in an if. Here we will say row item and then parentheses, quotation marks, total. Remember, that was the row that we just, and row and column that we just updated up here. We can ask a question. Always ask a question that can be answered by true or false in an if. So here we will say, is this one bigger than 10? But again, this is an object we take from the data table. We need to convert it to something that we can calculate on. So we will convert it to a double. Again, convert dot to double, like this. Parentheses rounded, like this. So now we convert this object to a double, and then we will simply just ask, is this one bigger than 10? Yes or no, true or false. If it's true, we go over here. If it's false, we go over here. It's only whenever it's bigger than 10 we want to do something, and that is update the big order. So again, drag in an assign, and here we will just say row item, parentheses, quotation marks, big order, like this. And what do we want to update it? That is just a simple yes. So quotation marks, yes, like this. And we will write it out here again. So that's it. That's how easy it is to work with Excel in UiPath. But do remember, we use data tables. Always data tables. They look like Excel rows and columns, but we just operate there. And always remember to write out the data table back to your Excel sheet. That's it. Let's run the robot. Like here, let's inspect our data as they are. Yeah. Here we have the total column, that's fine, and we have a big order because this one is greater than 10, and a big order here. That's fine. That's how you do Excel and data tables in UiPath. Let's go back to the lessons. Applications and selectors. We often work with applications with UiPath, so let's get started. Click the applications and selectors. Our mission today is simple. We want to take some user input that is in an integer format. Then we want to open up the Windows calculator. We want to multiply the input with 8 and then present it in a message box. It might seem a little bit too simple, but this will cover a lot of the struggles that we do when we automate in applications. And you can just do more advanced application automations after this lessons. Let's get started. So we go to UiPath. Then we click New Sequence, and here we can call it Applications. Then click Create, like here. The first thing that I want to do is to open up the calculator. And remember, we could use an open application here and drag it in, like this. We could give it a name maybe. If we wanted, I can say open application calculator, like this. Then we could either specify the file name or we could indicate it if it's open. It's not, but let's open it. So go down to start and then search for calculator, or if you got your local language, search for that. But in English, it's called calculator. Here, let me drag it in. I simply just click indicate, and then we can see here, I can choose this calculator. That's the application that I want to open. That's fine. Let me close it again and let's run it. This one will, of course, also only open up the calculator, and we can see that it's done here. To do operations on it, let's just create a static solution. That's just, we assume that the user clicked 5. Then we just need to click. So we'll, up here in activities, we'll find a click. So we'll have a click. We'll indicate where we want to click. We'll say 5. We'll change this to be a dynamic input later on. Click button 5, that's fine. Then we want to have a plus. So another click in, click indicate, click the plus. And finally, the second number. So here, click indicate. And we want to multiply it with 8. So choose 8. Now we just need an equal sign. So drag this one here. And this one corresponds to, let's say that you want to automate in Navision or SAP. This will be the approach. So we'll click indicate and then the equal sign. So now we created a solution that open up the application calculator and do some things in it. That's it. Let us close this one and let's try it again. So we will run the automation. 5 plus 8 equals 13. That's fine. But we didn't want to have the 5 as input as a static input. We want to have some user input. We already covered that. So we know that we are going to use an input dialog. Drag this guy in. So an input dialog, that is put in an integer between here. And here we will just say type in an integer between 1 and 9. Or actually you could do it between 0 and 9. Because that's the buttons that we have on our calculator. Then we want to store this in a variable. And remember, this is a string variable. So go down here, press Ctrl K, and we can call it str user input, like this. So now we store it. And because these guys here, we want to not have this 5 click, we want to have it dynamic. That is, if the user types in 7, we want the calculator to click 7. And this is a string, and the address that we use for this number here is also in a string format. We can see the variable down here, str user input, a string. What we will do is, now that we will go a little bit more advanced, is that each one of these activities, whenever we work in the UI, that is the user interface, then this will have an address. So click the 3 ribbons here, then click edit the selector. A selector is simply just the address of this activity in the Windows framework. So UiPath will know where it should click. And here we can see you don't have to understand all this, but the important part is the static part, because we can see here number 5 button, and then we can see a name here. Usually you'll just have to try a little bit. So what I do is that I now remove this name 5 because I know it will work as well. And then here we can see that this 5 here, we don't want it to be always type in 5. We want it to be dependent of the user input. So mark the 5 here like this, then right click. And here we can choose the variable that we just created up here. So we choose variable, and we can see that we have a list of the variables that we can choose from. I'll just choose this one and then click OK. And now we have made a dynamic input. So whatever we type in up here, we will get here. But do know that it will only work with numbers between 0 and 9. We cannot click on anything else on this calculator. So then we click OK. Let's try it. So I will close this one here again, and then we'll try our automation. Like this, I will have number 4. That's how I like it. I click OK. We open up the calculator, and now we type in 4 plus 8. That's 12. Isn't that clever? You now created a dynamic solution. We could change this one here. So instead of click button 5, we could say click dynamic button, like this. So now what we need to do is that we need to get the result and present it in a message box. That's fine. What we can do here is that we have the result here. What we can do is that we can send some hotkeys to here. That is, we can mark this, we can copy it to the clipboard. Let's do that. So here we will choose a send hotkey. A send hotkey is simply just whenever we want to send keys anywhere in the Windows framework. Right now it will be in our application, but we could be anywhere. So we'll drag in a send hotkey. Again, we need to indicate where do we want to send it. I click here. I want to send it in here. And instead of this send hotkey text display is 12, I want to send Control A, because What this does, that is a shortcut to mark everything. So Control+A. This is just a description, by the way. We will choose it down here. So I'll say Control, and then over in key, I simply just type in an A. We could also choose from all the predefined keys, but we will use the A. Like this. Now, one thing that we will need to investigate. Click the 3 ribbons here and again edit the selector. Because you can see here that this is a static selector as well. We can see that we have this not so nice 12 in the address, and that means that UiPath can only send this hotkey whenever the display says display is 12. And that is, by the way, a hidden title of this. So we need to do something about it. What we can do when we work with selectors is replace the static part with an asterisk. So now it will work. We can would work with any number. We can validate it, and we can see that it still works here. It will work whenever we say 33 up here. We can just try it. So if I say +8, then it's 20, and we can click validate here, and our selector still works. So we make it dynamic. This is some of the things that you need to do. You need to make the selectors dynamic a lot. But that will be very easy. If this doesn't work, it will just come up with an error, and you know how to fix it now. So then we'll say, okay. So now we have marked. So we marked this one here. Then we just need to copy it. So we'll send in another hotkey. We'll send in Control+C. That is copy. So I'll indicate where do I want to copy from. I want to copy from here, like that. Then I'll say Control+C. And let's just give this a better description. Ctrl+C, like this. So now we copied it. And again, what do you think we need to do? Click the 3 ribbons, click the edit the selector, and change the address, because we could have a lot of numbers here. So an asterisk. Validate, and we can see that it still works. Then we'll click OK. Now we just need to get the message we copied to the clipboard, that is the result. We need to get that, and we have an activity for that. So we will choose a get from clipboard, like here, and drag it in. This simply just get whatever that is in the clipboard and store it into a variable. It will be of the type string. So go over here to output in the properties, press Ctrl+K, str, result, like this. But now we have it in a string, and we need to present the result to a user. So what I do here is that I'll find a message box like this and drag it in. And let's just present the result in raw form. That is the str result. Should we see if it works? Let me close down the calculator. Let me run the file. Type in a number. Well, I will type in 7 this time. Open up the calculator. 7 + 8 = 15. And we will have our message box with the result. Isn't that clever? You learned a lot in this lesson. We just need to do one thing. That is just to close this calculator. So find a close application like this and drag it in right after the message box. And the message box will pause your workflow. So this close application will only perform whenever we click OK in the message box. Then we will close the application. So we click indicate. What application do we need to close? That is the calculator, like this. That's it. Let's try to run it again and see that our entire workflow will work. So I run the robot. Let's have 3 this time. 3 + 8, that's 11. We have 11 in our message box. When we click OK, this application will close. So we click OK and the application closed. That's it. That's how easy it is to work in applications in UiPath. Let's go back to the lessons. Browsers. We often want to automate in browsers, so click the browsers lesson. Here we will need to open up a browser with this URL. Then we need to do a login, and this is just a test page, but it could be any web page. It will be the same activities that we want to use. The login is here, Tom Smith, so we use that one, and we use the super secret password like this, and then we click login. Here we have the secure area, and if we look, we need to take a screenshot of that secure area. That's it. So let's create that in UiPath. Let me close down this one here and only have the lessons open. So I go to UiPath and then I'll say new sequence. I'll say browsers. The first thing that I'll need to do is to open up a browser. So open browser here and drag it in. I'll need to use a URL, and the URL, it was just this one here. So I'll right click in the lesson and I click copy link address. Go back to UiPath. As you now know, we don't use hard-coded in here, we use a variable. So we go down to variable, say str URL. Then in the default, I'll put in quotation marks and I'll paste in the address. Go down to the URL field, I'll say str URL. Now we are using the value of this variable and we'll open up a browser. Let's see how that is happening. So I run the file, like here. We will open up a browser and that will be Internet Explorer. That is because Internet Explorer is default and there's a good reason for that. Internet Explorer is often installed on all servers and we cannot be sure that Chrome is, or Firefox for that matter. So right now we open up Internet Explorer. So we can go up here to the browser type, then we can say Chrome. Now we will open up the address in Chrome. So let me run the robot again. This is the Internet Explorer. Here you can see that, oh, you couldn't see that, but we have it opened here in the Chrome. Let me close down this one and let me close down the Internet Explorer. Because now we opened up the browser. Then we just, in quotation marks, need to log in. So let me actually run it again because I need to have it open, so I need to know where I can log in. I could of course also have typed in the address, but it's more easy to simply just have the robot doing so. Because now I will need to have this username. So I'll go back to UiPath, and yes, you have guessed it right, we create variables. So str user, like here, in quotation marks, paste in the user. We can also create a password, str pass, then go back to the browser to get the password. That is here, like this. Back again to UiPath, quotation marks, paste it in. So to do the login, we will simply just do a type into. So in activities, find a type into and drag it in. We will have one for the user and one for the password. We will indicate where we want to type in the user. That will be in this box. You can see the yellow ones around it here. What do we want to type in? Well, we have a variable for that now, str user. We can also do it here in the password, str pass. Remember, we called it that. So str pass. We will create these two exactly the same way. Here we can have the type into, input a password, input username. Well, that's fine for now. You could argue that you might want to change the name. I'll leave that up to you. So now we have filled in these two things. We want to click the login. Like here. Drag and click. Indicate where we want to click. I want to click the login. Well, it doesn't matter if you click the whole button or just in here. This is a sub element of this, but I'll just take the big one. Like this. So now here you can change it to click login. Like this. This one will log us into the area. We can try to run it. So let me close down the Google Chrome with the internet login on and run the robot. So I run the robot. It's here. We can see that we now type in the username, the password, we click login. And what you didn't see was that we are in the secure area. Now we just need to take a screenshot of this area. And where do we want to place the screenshot? Well, go to our lesson folder where you downloaded your files, click in it. Let's make a new folder here, just right click, say browser, like this, and shift right click on this folder, copy as path, because we'll need to know where the screenshot should be placed. So we go back to UiPath. Now, after we click logged in, find a take screenshot here and simply just drag it in. We need to say where do we want to make the screenshot, and let me have it here. We want to have the screenshot in this browser. So we simply just indicate it. And what do we want to have a screenshot of? Well, let's just take the whole browser like this. So now we take a screenshot and let us change this. As we know, this is best practice. So we'll say login area like this. So now we have the screenshot and we will store it into a variable. So go over to the output, and here you might not know what kind of variable this is. It might be easy when we have the data tables. You know that it was data table when we work with that, but here, well, no clue. Then do the easy thing. Just press Ctrl K and we can just call it screenshot. Here we don't have a prefix yet because we don't know what kind of variable it is. So I'll just click create. Then we can go down to variables. We can see our screenshot here and we can see that it is of the type image. Well, then we simply just add the prefix from here, img screenshot. Isn't that clever? So now we created this variable and we stored in the screenshot in it. Then we need to save it to our folder. So I will go over here and find a save image, like here, and drag it in. We'll need an image. That was this variable from up here. It was called img screenshot. So we type that in here. And then we want a file name. The file name, well, we make a variable for our folder first. That was the one we copied from out here. So we click down here, create variable, str folder. This is of the kind string. We go over here and simply just paste it in. This was our main folder. So what we do here is that we can now say str folder, but we also need to give it a name. And to do so, we will say plus. This one is good. It will teach you to work with folders and files as well. Quotation marks. Then a backward slash. We can just call it screenshot and then PNG like this. So this one will work, or there might be a little challenge in here for you. Let's see. So let me close down the internet browser again, the Chrome, and run it. Here we log in, click login like this. The robot finished. Let's look at our screenshot. So we go into the browser, take the screenshot, and we have this. If by some way you could have a screenshot where you're still at your login screen, and that is because what's happening here is that we click login and then we take the screenshot. So you might want to have a little bit of delay here. That's how we sometimes need to use a little workaround. So that's it. I will ask you for one favor. Will you give me feedback here in the comment section? That is below the video you're just watching. Simply just type in a comment with maybe your name and then some feedback for the course. It will help me in getting better at making courses, but it will also improve my reach. And that is always good because then I can make more courses. I'll have more time for that. So let's do that. And what you'll do here is that we will create a variable for the feedback. Again, you don't need to post it. Then we'll just create the flow without clicking enter. So you're not posting anything, but we'll say str feedback. And then simply just type in your feedback here in quotation marks. That could be, hey Anders. Well, this is Anders from Denmark. I think your course is great, but please fix your ums. I'm not shy, so give me anything, any feedback you can think of. Of course, I also like the good ones. Then I'll say kind regards, Anders. What we need to do here is that we will need to send this feedback to the comment section because we are working here in a browser. So let me minimize this. Here we have it. We don't need this anymore. We created that. So we just right click here. We disable the activity and again, minimize it. So now we want to make a comment to the comment section here to the videos that you are watching. That is here. And we just need to, because the browser is open, you're watching the video. I know that, otherwise you couldn't hear me now. Then we just need to attach that browser. So we'll find a attach browser here and drag it in. Either below or in front, that doesn't matter. Then we indicate the browser, that is this browser here. and now we can do some operations in it. We want to type in the feedback. Again, we just don't click enter if you're not comfortable in typing in this thing. There's no pressure from here. I'm happy that you're just watching this video. Then we click indicate. We'll indicate this comment section like this. Maybe give it a better name. So I'll say comment, and then put in the feedback that we just made. But there's a built-in challenge here. So if I press Control Space, we can't find the feedback variable. Well, that's something you often see. That is because you define it in another scope and then it's not visible here. It's gone. Well, it's not gone. We just need to change the scope. So we find it. We created it in here in the open browser. Then in this do, now we can go down to variables and it's here. But it's only defined in this scope and we need to use it in the other scope. So simply just take the browsers like this and then close down the variable manager. Again, collapse this and now we can choose it from here. str feedback like this. And to post it again, don't do it if you don't want to. There's no pressure from here, but to post it, we need a click activity. So click like here. Then we go back here. And what do we want to click? We want to click the comment button, but we can't right now because it's gray out. But whenever we write, we can click it. So write something, then click indicate and indicate the comment one like this. Now there's one challenge, and this was a great thing that I can show you now because there's something in it, or at least right now. And that could be a workflow where we have something in a field. Then we can simply just go to properties and click empty field. This one will empty the field. Let's try to run the robot. So now we will empty the field and then we will type in the feedback and then click comment. Like this. If we go back to our browser, we have now posted feedback to the video. Thanks a lot if you did this, and thanks a lot if you're just watching it. That's it. Let's go back to our lessons. File handling. Now you are actually almost an advanced RPA developer, so let's learn how to handle files. The process is simple. We want to create a robot that will create 2 folders. Then take a look at files and sort these files into these 2 folders. Finally, make a log count. Well, our files, that was in the files here. So if we open up that, let me close down this one from the previous lesson. So in the sort files folder, we have 3 Excel files and 4 Word files. That's fine. We want to sort them. First, let me go one back. Let me shift right click to this folder, copy as path. You know the drill. Then we go back to UiPath. We create a new sequence for the file handling. So we'll say file handling, then we'll click create, like this. First thing that we will need to do is that we will need to create a variable for that folder, str folder, we can call it. Then we'll simply just paste in the value over here, like this. Let's get started. We want to create the 2 folders. Remember that in the sort files, we want these ones to go in an Excel folder and these ones to go in a Word folder. So to do so, we will find a create folder here, drag it in. We will need 2, so drag in 2. The full path of it, let's create the Excel one first. That is just the str folder. That is the main directory. Then we want to specify what name will our folder hold. So we'll say plus, then quotation mark, then we can type something in. We'll say /xlsx, like this. This one will create this folder. Then we similarly can create this below folder. That is just the docx, that is for the Word ones. Let's see that in action. So we'll run the robot. Like this, we can go out to our directory and we have now created 2 folders that our files can go in. But let's just delete those because we will create it when we run the robot finally. That's it. So we go back to UiPath. Now we need to gather all these file names, including their path, so that we can sort them. Or actually we can look at them and then sort them. So to do so, we will have a for each. Remember, this is a for each, not a for each row. So drag in a for each. Then we will say for each item, we can rename this. This name is just for your convenience, so call it whatever you want. We call it file here because we are actually looking at files. Then we can apply the .NET method. We can say directory, like this. Then we'll say get files. That's the method, get files. And then we want to tell UiPath, or actually it's Visual Basic, what files we want to get. And that is simply just the files here in this folder. So we'll say parentheses, and then we will use that variable, control space if you can't remember it, and simply just tab your way around it. So see, now we have good use of our variable. We already put it in 3 places. So now we get all these files. Let's just see how that looks, because this is just the strings that we are getting in. So if we take a write line and then write it out. So we will write out each file here. To do so, we will need to change the type argument to a string because it will be in the string format. And then we can just say file here, like this. So what we do now is that we create the folders, and then in a write line that is in the output console, we will get the file names. So let's go back to the output, and we can see here, there you go. There are our file names, including their path. So far, so good. Let us go out here. We can delete it again. Nothing happens. It will just override, but we want to see that the robot works. So now we have the files. We can delete this. So we take each file name. That's what's happening here. Before we wrote it out. Now we just need to look at it and say, hey, is this an Excel file? No. Well, is this a Word file? Yes, then we will just move the file correspondingly. So what we do here is that we will have our old if in. Remember that? That was very easy. That was where we asked a question that could be answered with true or false. So here I'll take a look at my file. So I say file, and then we can apply another .NET method that is the ends with, like this. What do we need to have it ends with? We'll say parentheses, then quotation marks, and we'll say .xlsx. So if we do that, then we know we are here. Similarly, we can create it for the Word one, but let's just create the condition first. Because if it is an XLSX file, we can move it to this XLX folder. So what we do here is that we'll find a move file here and drag it in. So what do we want to move? We have this file up here. So we'll say file like this. Where do we want to move to? Well, we want to move to this one up here, like this. That will do it. Let's just try to run it just to see that the Excel one at least work. Then we can copy it to the Word ones. And remember, this is so easy. There's no magic to it. So let us go to the folder, and we can see here that our Excel documents, they are gone. They are in here. That was what we wanted, right? Let me copy it back. Delete the folders again. And now we can just copy this if here. We're still in the for each. So we copy this one here, simply just placed it in below. Then we'll change this one here to docx, and we will change it down here as well to docx. Like this. So this one will work for both of the file types. Now we just need to create a log. What we want to do is that whenever we move a file here, then we know we are in here in the then we want to add 1 to an integer counter, to the Excel counter, and here to a Word counter. We'll create 2 variables first. So in the variables, say create variable int, sorry, that was Danish, xlsx, and remember it should be an integer like this. Change the scope to file handling, so we're sure we are outside there, because we want to create the log in the end. Docx, like this, that one will be an integer too, and it will be in the file handling. Per default, an integer is 0, so there's nothing in it. That's fine. We will just add to it whenever we move a file. What we will do here is that we'll have two assigns. We will have one assign here. So we will, when we move this file here, we know that we can add 1 to the counter, and to add 1 to a counter, we just say int xlsx. Remember that is the Excel files here that we actually adding to that counter. So we'll say int xlsx plus 1, like this. Similarly, we can create it down here. That will just be our docx counter. So here, int docx, and we will add 1 to that, whatever value that holds. So this one will just keep updating whenever we move a file. These two will go. Now we can create a log message. We haven't done a log message before, but it's actually the same as doing a write line. This is just a log message. We will use that later in the advanced course. So simply just choose, we can choose an info. This is just a log level. That is how it will be assigned, but it doesn't matter. Just take info. Then we can make a text, quotation marks. Then we can say you've sorted, then a space. And now we say plus, because we want the Excel files, that is the int xlsx, like this. We want it to a string, because right now it's an integer. We can write it out. And we also tried that before. That was the toString. Remember, I told you that you need to have this one in your mind. We'll use it a lot. Then we'll say plus. And this one was Excel files. So Excel files and space. This one will be a rather long sentence, but that's okay. We'll practice a lot of things that we learned. And then we'll say int the docs to string, then plus quotation marks, the space, then we'll say word files dot, then we'll say that's a total of space. I know this is a little bit long, but that's fine. We'll practice our variables handling. Then we'll have a parentheses, because now we want to add these two integers together before we are converting them into a string. So we'll say int xlsx plus int doc, then to string. And finally, we could have a plus, quotation marks, space, files, like this. That's it. Now we created our workflow that will sort our files and do a log for us. So we'll click run. And we can see that we have sorted 3 Excel files and 7 Word files. Well, something is definitely wrong here. We can see that we have the total, that's 10. And here I actually did make a mistake in the coding, but I do that all the time, every day as an RPA developer. I made these things. That was just nothing on purpose, but we can see that we put it out here, and that is for each file we added 1 to the docs, but we should drag it in here like this. But it's really good to see. You will need to solve a lot of these puzzles when things not working as expected, and do remember to pay attention to the details, because if we just gave this to our customers, we will have created a faulty robot. And of course, this wasn't a whole lot, but we will have to, we could make bigger mistakes, but let me copy these ones out. And then we will inspect that the robot will work. So we will delete these. Like here, we can go down to our output, and we have sorted 3 Excel files and 4 Word files. That's a total of 7 files. So far, so good. So this was a good exercise in file handling, but also in debugging your own workflows. Well, something was wrong here, and we could easily see what was wrong. Let's go back to the lessons. Hey guys, the moment I think a lot of you were waiting for, that is the data scraping moment, because now we will learn to data scrape. And the good news is that we already have been a lot of the components for that, so this will be very easy for you. Just do the operations with me. But let's click the lessons. We want to read an Excel file, and that is in our course files. So I'll go in here, I'll say data scraping, it's called Barnes. I want to do Amazon searches for each one of these 4 topics. And remember, the sheet is named topics. Then I want to data scrape the results. I want to data scrape the title, the URL, the author, the price, and write it back to separate sheets for each topics. Well, sounds easy, doesn't it? Maybe not whole, but just do it with me. Pause the video if it's too much, or if it's too fast rather. So what we do is that we go back to UiPath. And then instead of file handling, we will make a new sequence. We will say data scraping, like this, and click create. So what I want to do first is simply just to open up a browser and navigate to Amazon. So I'll find a open browser here and drag it in. Let's make a variable again as we are used to, str URL. Then in the default, put in 2 quotation marks. Then we'll say https, then colon, 2 forward slashes, amazon.com. We can close down the variables manager and up here put in the variable str URL. Choose the browser type to be Chrome and we can see if it works. Like here. There you go. We go to Amazon. What we need to do now is to search for topics like Excel, then scrape all these results, not only on the first page, but on as many pages as we have results. So let me go back to Amazon again, just to the front page, because sometimes there can be something with the selectors. So we go to the front page, like this. So what we want to do is that we want to open up the Excel sheet, read the topics, do searches for each one of these topics and data scrape based around it. Let's see how data scraping works before we do all these things, because that's the very cool thing. And the good news is that we have a data scraping wizard. Here we can select the values and let's say that we have done a search on, for example, vb.net. Then we'll select the first value. That will be of my title. So I click next. Here I choose the title. That's fine. Then I need to show UiPath the second element because then it can figure out the pattern. So now I have chose the first title, the second title. And we can see that all the titles are painted yellow. That was what we wanted. We also want the URLs corresponding to these items. You can see it if I move it a little bit up. There's URLs here down in the lower left corner. We want to have those as well. So tick the extract URL. We can give it a better name, URL. We can call this title, as that's what they are. Then we click next. Here you have it. We have both the title and the URL for all the items. That is only on the first page, and we want a little bit more because remember we wanted the authors and we wanted the price. So let's extract some correlated data. So now we want to extract the author and the price. So click extract correlated data. Simply just choose this entire author line, and we do it because some of the books can have more authors. We want to have that scraped, so I choose this one. I know I have the by with, but we can easily just do some data operations on it. Then I click next, and I take this line here as well. This one, you can see we get all the authors, not just the first one. And we can call this one author. We don't need the URL here because we already scraped that. So we click next, and we can see our preview here. We have title, URL, and author. One thing that we want to fix is that we want as many results as we can have, not only 100. So we just say 0 for all. Now we just need the price. So I say extract correlated data. Here, well, we need the entire price. So be sure to mark it with the $sign. Otherwise we cannot mark these two things together. If we do that, we just do this. So now we have the price as well. That's this one. Then we click next. Here you go. Of course, this doesn't look all that good, but it's easily fixed with some data table functions. So then we click finish. Now we have scraped what we wanted on this side. But remember, one site with results could have more pages. We want to have all pages on. Well, that's easy in UiPath. Just click Finish. Is data spanning multiple pages? Yes, it is. That was our mission. So click Yes, and then you just need to tell UiPath where the next button is. That's here. That's it. Now we scraped all the results from one side. We have it in here, and it's scraped to a data table variable. The first thing that I want to do is to rename it so it fits our standard. So instead of this notation, I'll say DT, and I'll say scraped, like this. Now we can create the flow so it will match all our topics, not only one topic. What we need to do here is first have an Excel application scope, like here, and drag it in. We will have a workbook path. That is the Excel path that we want to read. And remember, we haven't created that variable yet. So go out to your Excel sheet called Branch, shift right click, copy as path. Back to UiPath. So we'll say str Excel path, like this. Then paste it in over here, like this. Up here in the workbook path, simply just say str Excel path, like this. Close down the variables manager. Untick the visible, we don't want visible Excel. Now we have this. We can read the range. Still make sure you are under the Excel activities. So read range. This one will read the sheet into a data table. The sheet is named topics, so be sure to do like this. That's fine, we'll output it to a data table. So I'll say Control K, DT topics. It's simply just one table. You know, remember it was one column with 4 topics, but this could be huge. It could be 1,000 topics, like this. So now we read it. We can iterate through each topic, do an Amazon search, and then scrape the results. So let's have the open browser, drag it inside the Excel application scope, then it'll be easier in the end. You'll watch. So now I want to open the browser. It opens up the Amazon page like this. It's here. Remember that it doesn't look like this. It will look like this. Let me just be 100% sure that we are on the right page. So it will look like this. Then we will do a search here and we will click here. So what are we going to do? Well, we need to type into something. So I will have a type into, but before I can do that, I need to have something to type in. And that will be the result from the data table. And how do we do that? Well, we found that one out in the Excel one. We'll have a for each row. So now we are simply just iterating through each one of the rows in the data table. That's where the topic is. So we'll say for each row, and then we'll do the thing. So for each row in DT topics, like this. Then we will have a type into here, drag it in, and indicate where we want to type in. So we want to type something in here. And again, this one should be renamed because that is horrible to look at. So type into search, like here. What do we want to type in? We want to type in the term that we have in our data table. So that is simply just the current row. Remember your Excel skills from here. We are referring to the current row with row. Then item, that is column. Parentheses, and then we will say topic. Because it's an Excel object, we will have it to a string like this. So now we did a search, but that's just not the whole thing. We also need to click search, because if I just type in, let's say vb.net, nothing will happen. I need to click search here. So let's find a click activity like here and drag it in. So then I click here like this. We can have this one, click search. Like this. Because when we did that, we are now doing this. Then we get the results. Now we can data scrape. And to be sure that we have nothing in here, if we've done a previous search, we do 2 things. Always, when we start all over from the search, make sure you are on the same page every time, so you know that your workflow will perform the same way every time. Not only here in the browsers, but everywhere. What we can do here is always to have a navigate to start in each one of for each row, if that is necessary. Here we'll just say, go to str Amazon again. I know in the first instance we will go to the Amazon again. But after we've done the search, we wanted to get to the blank first page and do a search. We can also, if there's a cache in Amazon, we can have these empty field put on too. Now we click search, we can do our data scraping because we got the result here. So what we will do here is that we will simply just take this data scrape from our data scrape wizard, copy it, put it up here like this. And here you will see that this variable is simply not defined, and that is because we now changed the scope. So go back here to this first scraped one, go down to variables. In the DT scraped, simply just change the scope to the outer data scraping like this, and now you will see that we have no error up here. Then we can delete this one down here. We don't need it. We already have the data scraping in here. So now we data scrape to DT scraped, and because each time we do a search here, we data scrape, we want to have it written out to our Excel sheet. Otherwise, this data table will just be written over and over. And then if we put the Excel sheet here, only the last result will come up. So what we will do here is that we will find a right range like this on the one on the Excel, drag it in. Where do we want to write to? Remember, we want to write out to a new sheet with the name of the topic, so not sheet 1. And how do we get the name of the current topic? Well, we actually have it up here. So simply just take this one here, and in the sheet, just put in this. We are deleting this as best practice, as well as add headers to our data scrape results. Now we just need to add in this DT scraped, and we're done. Let's see if this is not working, and it's not working. Not only working, it will work fine. Let's run the workflow. We are running the workflow now, opening up the browser, performing our first search, scrape the data. Remember that we have maybe 7 or 10 pages. Now we are scrolling through the pages, getting all the results out. It will probably take a little while. Just lean back with your cup of coffee and enjoy your awesome automation. These books, well, some of them about VBNet are really awesome. 2 of them. In fact, I'll put the link to the books below here in the description, as well as I will have some other useful links. Now we're just waiting. It will be writing out to the Excel, and then we're waiting for the next scraping. Like here, you can see that it took a little while. That's okay. It is a lot of results that we need to comprehend. Now it's Power Automate, another cool automation product that I can recommend. I made a beginner's tutorial. It's free with your Office package. I can recommend you checking that one out. We'll search for Excel and scrape the good results for Excel. Excel is, as I said, a very nice way to deal with data. It's important that you can do Excel. If you can do VBA as well, you are an accomplished RPA developer. So specialize in these things. I can recommend SQL, Excel, VBA, regex. That is the most important ones, and of course visualbasic.net. That's it. We've done the data scraping. Let's go to Excel and verify that we indeed had scraped out the results. Well, it looks like we have. We have the Excel, we we have the Power Automate, and we can see all these nice results going down here. We have like 145 books here. That's how easy it is to data scrape. So you did it. You completed this course. But let's go back to the lessons. Because right now you're in a position where you are actually an advanced developer in terms of, the usual automation person in a business. What you need to do now is practice. Practice, practice, practice. I have this playlist with advanced automation, UiPath automation. Go through these. It's ready to build use cases from the start to the end. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. That will really help me a lot. Well done. You are now an RPA developer. Why not go for the advanced one so you can actually get a job with this? It's very easy. Just spend a couple of hours. Take this playlist to the right, where I will teach you everything about UiPath advanced use cases. Or take the playlist to the left, where I will teach you ReFramework, which is another great way to learn UiPath and to scale your robots.